today's video, we are going to talk about how I painted this black tuxedo cat. If you would like to paint along with me in real time and get a free downloadable traceable, join me on Patreon, where for only $5 a month, you can paint along with me. And this tutorial actually ended up being an hour, but a lot of my tutorials are 2 hours or longer, and they're really in-depth, and you will learn a lot. And I also have several other tutorials, including a dog, a cat, hummingbirds, and several other things. So you get instant access to all those full-length tutorials with free downloadable traceables when you join me over on Patreon. So I'd love to have you do that. And don't forget to give this video a like, leave me a comment, and subscribe. So let's get started, you guys. Okay, so the first thing that I always do with a painting, almost always, is I mask the whiskers first. I didn't do that with this painting. I was kind of in a hurry to get started. I was kind of excited about this painting, so I just decided that I was going to do gel pen later. So I'm using my silver black velvet size 8 brush here. And like I always do in all my paintings, the very first step that I do is I get the whole area wet that I want to paint. And you can see I'm carefully painting around the eyes. If there are hard areas that I want to paint around, then that I want to have hard edges, I'll paint around those. So anywhere where I want really bright colors, like in eyes, usually it's the eyes, I'll paint around those with clear water. And you don't want it puddling, and you don't want it just a tiny bit damp. You want it fairly moist. And depending on how fluffy you want the fur, the more wet the paint, the more wet the paper is, the fluffier the fur will look. And this cat had where the black paint meets white paper in his markings, like on his forehead. I wanted those to be really pretty soft edges, and I wanted to let the water kind of push up into that black to create a pretty soft edge. So you'll see me do that later on. But here I'm going in and doing the ears first. And a lot of times the ears will have that black liner around the periphery of the ear. And that will look so pasted on, stuck on, if you don't paint that line around the edge of the ear into moist paper. Now, outside the ear and the background is usually fairly dry to maybe a little bit moist, just to keep the outside edge a little soft, a tiny bit soft. So a lot of painting cats the way I do is all about controlling your water on the paper and in your brush. How much water do you have on your paper? How much water do you have in your paintbrush? So right here, I wanted these blacks really dark. So I had cream consistency paint in my paintbrush, and I've done a whole video about cream consistency, water, tea consistency, and milk consistency. It's basically the more water you add to your paint in your brush, then the lighter the color will be, of course, on the paper. That makes sense. So here I'm going in with cream consistency, and I'm painting right up into those white areas on the cat, but I'm letting the water on the white paper push up into the black of the paint. And that's another reason why I use lamp black paint for this painting, because it granulates a little bit, and I like how that works with my push technique. If you haven't seen my push technique video, watch that. That's where I explain how I use like little drips of water to drip like into the middle of his white forehead, and that water will spread out and into that black paint and create these interesting little textures along the edge. So that's my push technique in action. I really like using that technique a lot. So here you can see I'm painting around the edge of the cat again to soften edges. I felt like his right cheek got a little bit too hard, but so I went along that edge with a damp brush to soften that edge while it was still damp. That won't work if you do that when your painting completely dries. By the way, I did release this video once and it was kind of all about the paper I was using, but then people got mad and I hate that. And I was so excited about this new information I learned about the paper that I wanted to make a video, but I didn't want to blab it all over the world. And I was given permission by Yutaka Murakami to share it with my students, but there's a language barrier and I don't think he meant he wanted me to share it with everybody. But I am going to share it with my Patreon students. But I just want to be respectful with this information. So this is special paper and it allows the paint to interact and make those furry edges even more pronounced. Now I have been able to get these furry edges on cold press paper, on hot press paper, even sometimes on Yupo. You can do it on other papers. It's just that this paper really lets you make those really cool fur textures even more pronounced. So I just love that. And I've been trying to figure this out, you guys, for so long, and I finally figured it out. Here you can see when I'm painting along his shoulder, that black edge where black meets white along his shoulder and lower body, I was taking my brush and swishing the water up into that black pigment to try to even make that fur texture even more pronounced. So that's what I was doing there. I did that a lot, like on his forehead. I would put like a little bit of extra drip of water after I'd gotten the black paint down and then push it up into his forehead to push that paint up. Then working on his eyes. Now for his eyes, what I did was I put down a tea consistency wash underlayer of Winsor Green Gold, and then I put in a little drop of permanent green light, and I also used cobalt blue. And usually along the tops of the eyes they have a darker cast shadow from light hitting the cat from above and putting a shadow in the eye. So I usually put like a little bit of a blue or darker color along that top edge of the eye too. And I try to do this all when everything is wet in the eye, so it all kind of merges together and is soft and makes it look more moist, wet. I was just watching a Kelly Stamps video and she talks about how she doesn't like the word moist, but there you have it. That's the word that needs to be said, moist. It's funny. She's funny. Go check her out. Anyway, okay, so then in the ear, you can see I'm getting a bit of a purplish color for the skin that shows in the ear, and I'm painting negatively around those white hairs, and I'm using ultramarine blue and Winsor violet for those colors. And then when the eyes are dry, I go back in and I paint the pupils in, and those too need to be pretty hard edged. And sometimes I'll do a few little soft edges when I can, because that really makes the eye look even more realistic. But here I just painted them dry, and I attached the pupils to the eyeliner of the top of the eye. And that's another trick that I almost always try to do, even if in the reference photo, like if you look closely at this reference photo, the pupils are like little islands in green. But I attached the pupils to the top of the eyeliner just to make them look more artistically pleasing. And that is a trick that I use in all my paintings. I try to connect different parts of the painting together. So for the nose also, I think somehow I sped past the nose already, but I used Naphthol red. And to paint the nose, because he has that pink nose that kind of gets lighter and lighter as it goes up his face, I painted that all at one time, and I put down clear water just for the nose where I wanted that red to gradiate up his face softly, and I put the most Naphthol red down here, and then just let the paint work its way up that clear water that I put down just naturally, and let the paint do its own thing. So that created a nice little effect, I think, soft effect on his nose. And then I'm getting to the stage where I'm just putting in little details. For the background, I worked wet and wet, and I got the whole background wet, and then I dropped in cobalt blue permanent green light. And did I put dab, 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 cobalt, and then green, and then cobalt and green? No, I did like a color block almost. Big old block of cobalt up here, and then a block of permanent green down here, and then blocked it in. So I don't know, I just think it's more aesthetically pleasing that way, to do the background that way with larger blocks of color rather than making them a bunch of colors all mixed together. And then I was using a scrubber. I almost always use a scrubber in all my paintings at the end because it just finishes a painting so nicely, and you can create soft edges. So like I would use the scrubber to scrub out his chin a little bit and a little bit under his eyes where the light was hitting underneath his eyes on his cheek. And this particular paper did not allow scrubbing. This was the very first time I used this paper, and I learned very quickly that I'm not going to be able to use a scrubber on this paper. But if you're using Arches Cold Press 140 pound, which I highly recommend you use that paper for this painting, if you try this painting, then you can use a scrubber if you use Cold Press, Arches Cold Press 140 pound. All right, I'm putting in those little details. There goes the gel pen on. Putting on that gel pen. Gotta love a gel pen. It saves the day sometimes. And then I'm putting in a little splash of Windsor Violet on his chest just to make that shadow interesting. And you can see how in the corner of the cat, like on his white shoulder, I painted over his white shoulder and connected it to the background completely, so there's almost a disappearing edge between the white of his chest and the lower right hand corner of the painting, because I don't want the viewer's eye to get stuck down there where there was high contrast. Towards the end of the painting, his lower shoulder was completely white against a pretty dark background, and that created a lot of contrast, and contrast is what draws your viewer's eye, so I didn't want that. So at the very end, I went over and painted over that whole area to kind of tone down that contrast down there in the lower right corner. So that's just a little something I did to finish the painting. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. I would love for you to join me over on Patreon, support my channel by leaving me a comment and interacting with me in the comments. I will answer any question I can, and be sure to subscribe. I upload new videos every week. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.